Okay, so we've been talking about lists and how we can create lists, and one of the biggest things that we found with lists is that lists can have different types of elements in them, and these elements can be different data types. For example, we can have integers and floats, or strings and booleans, or we can have integers, floats, and strings and booleans, right? So we know that now. Not only can we have those different data types, but we can also have lists as a data type inside of a list. So here is an example of that. Now we call these two-dimensional lists or two-dimensional arrays. You may hear them called that. But essentially what happens here is we've got this big list, okay, these bigger outer square brackets, and we're going to call that 2D list. Inside of that, we have lists as elements, okay? So we have a list 1, 2, 3, 4. We have a list 5, 6, 7, 8, a list 9, 10, 11, 12, and a list of 13, 14. These are four lists that are acting as elements inside of a list. Now, we can access those elements just like we'd access any other elements in any other list. For example, if we had a list like this, number list is equal to 5, 2, 6, 4, 1, 3, 9, right? Whatever. If I want to reference one of these elements, I call it by the index value, right? So if I wanted to print the number 6, I call index value 0, 1, 2. If I want to call 3, right, element 3, I get index value 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So my print statement would look like this. Number list 5 in the brackets, right? And that would print the respective element for index 5. Well, we can do the same thing with lists that are inside of lists. If I want to print the first element, which in this list is this inner list, right? So I would print 2D list 0. Same way with the second one, the third one, and the fourth one. I call them by the respective index values, and that lets me print each element. The difference is, instead of the element being an integer or the element being a float, the element is actually a list. Okay? So let's run this. So if I run this program, you can see that it prints each element in the list. Just as before I could have printed a single value, I'm printing a list, which is technically the single value. Now the trick comes in where I want to get, for example, the number 10, or I want to get the number 8, or I want to get the number 6. This is where the trick comes in. The way this works is I have to think of it in terms of, okay, which list is that element in? So if I want to print the number 8, I say, okay, here's element 0. Does that have my 8 in it? No. Here's element 1, right? Because element 0, element 1, this is element 1. It does have my 8 in it. So when I go to print this, I start with saying I want index value 1. So I print the name of my list and then index value 1. Now, inside of that inner list here, which value, which index value points to the element of 8? Well, 0, 1, 2, 3. That's where we get the 3. So this is my inner list, right? My inner element, which inner list I want. So we always start with 0, right? 0, then 1. And then which item or which index in that list. So in this case, it's 3, right? 0, 1, 2, 3. So if I run this, it should print my 8, which it does. So look at another example. If I want to print the number 6, okay, so we look, element 0 does not have 6, element 1 does, so I put my 1 here. Inside of that list here, which index do I want? Well, I want the 6, right? So 0, 1, so I put the 1 there. So I say, okay, print 2D list, 1, 1, that should print the number 6. So if I run that module, and then there you see is my 6. Okay? So it really is not much unlike working with other lists. It's just we have to remember that these are lists inside of a list. So what if I want to change a value? What if I want to change one of my elements? Well, I treat that the same as I would anything else. So I want to change the number 7. So which list do I want? Well, there's 0, here's 1. Okay, I want to change a 7, so I put my 1. Well, which index value in that list am I changing? Well, in here, right, we got 0, 1, 2. So I put my 2 there, and I set that equal to 100. Now, if I want to see that, I need to print my list so I can see that it changed. So if I run this, save this, you can see here that in this, there's my second list, that 7 is now 100. Okay? Now, what if I did something like this? Okay? 2D list 0 is equal to 100, 200, 300, 400. Will that work? What will it do? Let's find out. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. I'm going to comment this out because honestly that's not going to, well, no, we can leave that in there. That's fine. Don't worry about commenting that out. We'll leave it in there. Let's go ahead and run this. So if I run my program, notice what happened. It changed that list to be what I had, 100, 200, 300, 400. So not only can I change specific elements inside the inner lists, I can change the entire inner list itself. Okay? So you may see this out in the real world. This is something that could possibly happen. We've seen different things like this. Essentially what you can do is think of this as a table. Okay? Treat it like rows and columns. Oh, look at that, rows and columns. So in here I create a spreadsheet just to kind of show you. Now the current list looks like this. Okay? With that being a 100. So this is what the current list looks like. The first number that we put in the square brackets always respectively points to a row. So row 0, row 1, row 2, row 3. Then we get into our columns. That's our second number. Column 0, column 1, column 2, column 3. So if I wanted to change the number 10, it would be row 2, column 1, which means I would put 2D list, and then in the square brackets a 2, and then the square brackets 1. That gets me to 10. So this is how you can think of a true two-dimensional array, or in our case, a two-dimensional list. You can think of it as rows versus columns because it does make sense when you reference those particular numbers. And if it's helpful, draw it out. If it's helpful, draw it out like this to see how that works. Now, you can do it that way, or you can do it much similar to the way that we've been doing. The first number is the actual inner list, right? The element that's associated with that inner list. So in this case, 1, it's this list here. And then The 3 is the particular element inside of this one. So inside of here, I want 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay? So it really is kind of a nifty thing that you can do with this. Now, how can I auto-populate a two-dimensional list? Well, we can do this with list comprehension. Okay? So here is how we built just a single list, right? We built just a single list that would allow me to iterate through the numbers 0 through 7, right? Because we go up to but not including 8. And we add that or append that to this list, right? We talked about this in the list comprehension video. This allows me to print the numbers in the list without it looking like a list. And I'm not really concerned that you know that. We'll look at that here in a little bit, but just kind of so you know. Okay? To do a two-dimensional list, we just put for loops together in list comprehension. So what that would look like, I'm going to delete this a minute. Essentially, I would have this, for x in range of 8, and then we would do for y in range of 4. We would do, we would do a my 2D list dot append, and then we would append the x and y's is what we would do. Okay? What we're doing here is we're doing the same thing, okay? But we're doing it list comprehension style. Okay? Is what's happening. We're doing this list comprehension style. All right? So let me show you what this looks like. It's going to not print, well, okay. What we're going to do is we're going to print the contents of the my 2D list. So I'm going to get rid of this for now. We talked about the list comprehension video. So we're going to auto-generate this list, and then I'm going to print the contents of that list. All right. So if I run this for you to see what it looks like. Okay. So the way you can think of this is we're going to create a list. Okay. That's what this is going to do. It's going to create a list of numbers 0 through 7, and we're going to do that 4 times. Okay? So if you want to think of it like this, we're going to create 4 rows of this list. That's what this is, right? 4 rows of 0 through 7. Okay? That's what list comprehension does. Now, if you want to see it the other way, print my 2D list, right? If I just want to print the entire list, you can see what that looks like. Okay? Again, you got your inner list, inner list, inner list, all the way through, right? So you got 4 inner lists. And again, you can kind of think of those as rows. So you're doing 4 rows of these lists is what you've got. Okay? So this is just a list, a way to generate a two-dimensional list using list comprehension. Now, where would this be useful? Because obviously that's going to be the question. Well, let's pretend for a moment that you work for a movie theater. All right? Pick your theater, I don't care. And you are in charge of tracking the seating in the theater. So somebody comes in to you and says, I want to sit in this row in this seat. Is it available? Or somebody comes in and says, I need 2 seats. What seats are available? Right? Well, in a theater, you have rows and you have seats in those rows, right? So you might sit in row 5, seat 6, or row 10, seat 3, or maybe like at some of our convention centers, you're in row I, seat 2, right? Well, what we're going to do is I'm going to create a movie theater here. Now, I'm not doing this with list comprehension, okay? I'm doing this a different way. Now, I could do this with list comprehension if I wanted to, but I want to show you the other way in which this can be generated, all right? So what I'm doing is I'm going to create a row that has 5 dashes, right? And we're going to do that 4 times. So this is my list comprehension right here. I'm going to put dashes in for C 5 times. So I'll have 4 rows, and each row will have 5 dashes in it. And I'm going to append all those together to this list I call movie theater. So I use a dot append, and I'm going to append the row. This is so I can build my 2-dimensional array. All right? So this 4, like I said, again, this creates my row of dashes. And I do 5 dashes, right? 5 dashes, and I'm going to do that 4 times. Every time I do it, I'm going to build my array. Now, what this is going to show you, this print statement here is going to show you how that works, how the 2-dimensional array is constructed. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark off which seats have been assigned. Okay? So what's going to happen is we're going to have a situation where our array, if we wanted to look at it, is going to be a little different, right? So I said we're going to have, what do we say, 4 rows of 5 seats. So 0, 1, 2, 3. So we're going to have a 5th column here. And inside of here, this is what it's going to look like, if I can get my dashes to work right. Okay. Let me fill that all in. And down you go. Okay. So when I first run the program, this is what it's going to look like. We're going to have 4 rows, and each row is going to have 5 dashes in it. So we have our rows and columns. That is produced by this. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to assign a value of 0 to R and a value of 0 to C. And I'm going to say, okay, in my list, my row is going to be 0, my column is going to be 0. I want to put an X there. So what's going to happen is it's going to go in and say, okay, row 0, column 0, put an X there. Okay? And then down here, we're going to iterate through and assign these automatically. So if you have somebody that says, I want 5 seats or 6 seats or whatever, all together, this is kind of how that's going to work. So we're going to go to our index 2. So that's technically going to be row 3, right? Because if you think about it, index 2 is 0, 1, 2, right? And then it says the letter I. So I, for I in range 1 to 4. So it's going to start at 1. Or remember, we always start at 0. So it's going to go to 1, put an X, then 2, put an X, 3, put an X, and then it's going to stop before it gets to 4. So we're going to have our 3 X's here. Down here, this next one, we're doing a similar thing. We're going to start at 0 and go to 5. So we're going to go to our row 3, right? Because movie theater 3. So index value 3. So 0, 1, 2, 3. That puts us in row 4 technically, right? If we think of our seating. And we're going to do for I. So it's going to say, okay, X, 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 X. And we're going to go to 4 because we go 1 less. So we actually will stop right there, right? It's not going to do all the seats. And the last thing we do here is we just print out what the seating chart looks like. So let's see if we've got this correct. All right. Oh, it does fill in the last one. Sorry, I misspoke. That should be an X there too. All right, so what we've got. Here you can see how the list was getting built. Every time it went through, it took one row of 5 dashes and appended it to the movie theater list. Here's the second iteration, the third iteration, and the fourth iteration. So you can see we have our 5 internal lists. It just happens to have dashes in them. Okay? And then we assign our X's to those lists. Okay? Based on the code down here. So at 0, 0, there's an X. Then you go, we never touched this row. This row we have X's in these 3. And the last one we have X's in all of them. Just like our spreadsheet. Okay? So this is just a way that we could use to really demonstrate how a two-dimensional list could be effective. So if somebody come in, okay, and says, okay, I need some seats, but I need at least 3 seats together. All right. So if they need 3 seats together, let's see, we can put them in either row 0 or row 1, right? So which one do we want to put them in? Well, let's put them in row 1, all right? Or let's put them in this row here. So what we're going to do is we say, okay, for I in range. Now, they need 3 seats together. Well, do they want an aisle seat or do they want to sit in the middle? Well, they say, you know what, we want to have an aisle seat. Okay, well, we can put you in these 3 seats. And they say, cool, let's do that. So we're going to say, what is our range going to be? Well, technically, do we have to start with a 0? Well, no, because it's the beginning of the row, so we don't have to. So we could put that in or not. Let's go ahead and leave it out. Well, let's put it in there just to show. And we're going to stop at what? Well, we're going to stop at index value 0, 1, 2. So we need to make this a what? A 3. Yep. So we do that, and we're going to say, okay, movie theater. They want to be in row 2 or row 1, right? Which is the second row, if you think about it that way in terms of a theater. So its index value is 1. And we're going to go with an I here. And we're going to set that equal to X. Okay? So let's run to see what happens. See if we get the right seats. And we do. The first 3 seats are taken. So we sell our tickets, and all's good to go. So, like I said, the biggest thing is to show you how this can be used in the practical sense. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a chance to type this in and play around with it. I probably should have done that at the beginning, but that's okay. Go ahead and type in what you can see right now. I'll pause the video, or you can pause the video, type this in, and then I'll move it down in a moment. So go ahead, pause the video now, type this in. All right, I'm going to scroll down a little bit here so you can get the last line. Okay. Go ahead and pause the video again to get the rest of it. Okay, so now that you have that in there, that is the movie theater code. You're using a 2-dimensional array, and basically you're tracking seating for your theater so that somebody could come in and buy tickets, get seats they want, and obviously you can make this more interactive as you go through if you want to. Okay. I may throw these up on my GitHub account in, let's see, probably week 4, where we talked about list comprehension. So you can follow me on GitHub as the Dark Penguin. That is my handle on GitHub. The direct link for my GitHub is in your Canvas class, so feel free to click on that and take you directly to the repository where this code is at. Okay? All right. If you have any questions, feel free to squirt me an email or ping me. If not, I bid you good morning, good afternoon, good evening.